Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we are diving into a moment that may redefine the course of the war and permanently alter how power, security, and vulnerability are understood in the modern world. Moscow targeted. Ukraine's strike exposes the Kremlin's vulnerability. These words alone would have sounded impossible not long ago. Yet today, they capture a reality that has sent shockwaves through Russia, Ukraine, and the global political order. For years, Moscow stood as a symbol of untouchable power. While wars raged on distant fronts, capitals like Moscow were assumed to be protected by layers of defense, intelligence, and political deterrence. The idea that Ukraine, fighting for its survival against a much larger adversary, could reach Russia's capital was often dismissed as fantasy or propaganda. That assumption has now been shattered, and with it, a carefully maintained illusion of invulnerability. When reports emerged that Ukraine had successfully targeted Moscow or areas surrounding it, the initial response was disbelief. State media attempted to control the narrative, officials rushed to reassure the public, and security forces moved swiftly to contain both the physical and psychological fallout. But in the digital age, information moves faster than control. Images, videos, and eyewitness accounts spread rapidly, painting a picture of a capital forced to confront a reality it had long avoided. The war was no longer far away, it had arrived at the doorstep of power. To understand why this moment matters so deeply, we must first understand what Moscow represents. Moscow is not just a city. It is the political heart of Russia, the seat of the Kremlin, the command center of the military, and the symbol of national authority. It is where decisions are made, narratives are shaped, and power is projected. Any successful strike that reaches this space carries immense symbolic weight, regardless of the scale of physical damage. For the Kremlin, the greatest danger may not be material destruction, but psychological exposure. The Russian state has invested enormous effort into portraying itself as strong, secure, and in control. From the earliest days of the conflict, the message to the Russian public was clear. The war is necessary, it is managed, and it will not affect your daily life. Moscow embodied that promise. Ukraine's strike exposes the fragility of that narrative. Vladimir Putin's leadership has long been built on the perception of control. His legitimacy is not rooted in democratic accountability, but in the promise of stability and strength. He presented himself as the man who restored Russia's dignity after the turmoil of the 1990s. Under his rule, Russia was supposed to be respected, feared, and secure. A strike reaching Moscow challenges that image at its core. It suggests that despite all the power, all the weapons, and all the rhetoric, Russia is not immune. From a military perspective, this moment raises troubling questions. Moscow is among the most heavily defended cities in the world. Russia has repeatedly claimed that its air defense systems are advanced and reliable. A Ukrainian strike that reaches the capital forces analysts to ask difficult questions. Were defenses overwhelmed? Were resources stretched thin by the prolonged conflict? Were there failures in intelligence, coordination, or technology? Each possibility points to deeper vulnerabilities. Ukraine's ability to target Moscow also highlights the transformation of modern warfare. This is no longer a conflict defined solely by tanks, trenches, and front lines. Drones, precision strikes, intelligence sharing, and technological innovation have reshaped what is possible. Ukraine, facing a far larger military, has relied on adaptability and creativity. Its strike is not only a tactical action, but a strategic message. Distance and size no longer guarantee safety. From Kiev's perspective, This strike is about consequences. Ukrainian leaders have argued since the beginning that as long as the Russian population feels insulated from the war, there will be little pressure for change. Ukrainian cities have endured relentless attacks. Homes, hospitals, schools, and power infrastructure have been destroyed. Civilians have lived under constant threat. Restraint did not bring safety. Bringing the war closer to Moscow is meant to force a reckoning. The concept of red lines has played a central role in the Kremlin's messaging. Russia repeatedly warned that certain actions would provoke devastating responses. Strikes deep inside Russia, especially near the capital, were often implied to be unacceptable. Ukraine's action tests the credibility of those warnings. When red lines are crossed without immediate catastrophic consequences, their deterrent power weakens. Inside Russia, the impact of this strike is complex and deeply unsettling. Official statements emphasize calm and control. State media focuses on successful interceptions and minimizes damage. But fear does not need official confirmation to exist. For many Russians, this is the first time the war feels real. Air raid alerts, security lockdowns, and visible defensive measures disrupt daily life and challenge assumptions of safety. Fear has a corrosive effect on political systems. When people feel secure, they may tolerate censorship, propaganda, and sacrifice. When that sense of security is shaken, questions begin to emerge. Why has the capital been targeted? Why is this war continuing? Who is responsible for bringing danger closer to home? These questions may not lead to immediate protest, but they erode trust over time. Within the Kremlin, pressure is likely intense. Failures are dangerous in systems where loyalty and competence are closely tied to survival. Military commanders, intelligence officials, and security agencies may find themselves under scrutiny. Blame may be quietly assigned, rivalries may deepen, and decision-making may become more frantic. This internal tension is what true vulnerability looks like. Not just damaged buildings, but shaken confidence. Ukraine understands that targeting Moscow carries serious risks. Retaliation is almost guaranteed. Russia may escalate attacks on Ukrainian infrastructure and civilians. But from Ukraine's perspective, escalation has been a constant since the beginning. Ukrainian cities were attacked regardless of restraint. The logic now is to apply pressure where it matters most, at the symbolic and psychological center of Russian power. Internationally, the strike has sent shockwaves through diplomatic circles. Governments around the world are reassessing assumptions about the conflict. Some fear that targeting Moscow increases the risk of wider escalation. Others argue that exposing Russia's vulnerability could deter further aggression by showing that the costs of war are not one-sided. This debate reflects the fragile balance of global security in an interconnected world. The symbolism of Moscow being targeted resonates far beyond Russia and Ukraine. Capitals represent continuity, authority, and identity. When a capital is threatened, it signals a profound shift. Ukraine's strike tells the world that this war has entered a new phase, one where traditional boundaries and assumptions no longer apply. Technology plays a critical role in amplifying this moment. In the past, governments could control narratives more effectively. Today, smartphones and social media ensure that events are documented and shared instantly. Images of air defenses firing, emergency vehicles moving through Moscow, and heightened security spread faster than official explanations. Narrative control becomes increasingly difficult. For ordinary Ukrainians, the strike on Moscow brings mixed emotions. There is a sense of grim validation that the war is no longer invisible to Russians, but there is also fear. Ukrainians know the cost of retaliation. They understand that each escalation brings new dangers. Hope and anxiety coexist in a fragile balance. The humanitarian toll of the war remains devastating. Civilians continue to suffer, especially in Ukraine, where displacement, trauma, and loss are widespread. Russian civilians now experience a glimpse of insecurity many Ukrainians have lived with for years. While responsibility for the war lies with political leadership, ordinary people on all sides bear the consequences. This moment also affects Russia's global standing. Allies and partners who rely on Russian security guarantees may quietly reconsider their assumptions. If Moscow itself can be targeted, what does that mean for Russia's ability to project power elsewhere? These questions may not be voiced publicly, but they influence strategic calculations behind closed doors. Deterrence, a cornerstone of international relations, is being tested. Russia relied on the threat of escalation to discourage certain actions. Ukraine's strike suggests that deterrence has limits, especially when a nation believes its survival is at stake. This challenges traditional models of power and restraint and forces a reevaluation of what escalation really means. As the war moves into this new phase, the future is uncertain. Will Russia escalate further in response, deepening the cycle of violence? Will Ukraine continue to target symbolic sites to maintain pressure? Or could this shock create a narrow opening for diplomatic engagement? History shows that wars often change direction after moments that expose hidden vulnerabilities. For Vladimir Putin, the challenge ahead is profound. Maintaining authority when fear reaches the capital is far more difficult than projecting strength abroad. Increased censorship, repression, and surveillance may follow. But fear has a way of spreading despite control. Once people realize that power cannot guarantee safety, trust begins to erode. Globally, the targeting of Moscow forces a reevaluation of modern warfare. The idea that powerful nations can keep war far from their own populations is increasingly outdated. Innovation, intelligence, and determination have narrowed the distance between front lines and capitals. Moscow's experience is a stark reminder that no place is truly immune. The Kremlin's vulnerability is not just about defenses or technology. It is about perception. Power depends as much on belief as on force. Ukraine's strike challenges the belief that Russia's core is untouchable. That psychological shift may prove more consequential than any physical damage. As the world watches, one thing is clear. Moscow being targeted marks a turning point that will be studied for years. It exposes weaknesses, reshapes narratives, and raises urgent questions about escalation, deterrence, and the future of the conflict. Whether this moment leads to deeper chaos or opens a path, however uncertain, toward resolution remains unknown. Thank you for staying with us through this in-depth analysis. If you found this video informative, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel for continued updates and insights as this critical story unfolds. Stay informed, stay aware, and we'll see you in the next video.